that that's just laughable. And the reason why they do it is and the reason why they think it's laughable is because they're in rebellion against God.
Can't argue that.
What's the argument that nothing can be accounted for out of the Christian worldview?
Well, first of all,
all of the worldviews are incoherent, basically.
First of all, because God said so.
Well, that's okay.
God is defined. Wait a minute. You're asking me from my worldview. If I gave you an answer that was inconsistent from my worldview, you could say, well, that's not consistent with your worldview. If I appealed to some other authority other than God's revelation, you could say, well, that's not the ultimate authority. So I'm telling you from my ultimate authority. Now, it's up to you whether you want to accept my ultimate authority or what you are picking for your ultimate authority. Okay? So,
I asked you.
Right. You're asking me, how is it the impossibility to the contrary? Okay. I said, first of all, due to the fact that God says that everything in this world is his creation. Every contingent state of affairs depends upon him. Therefore, if somebody comes along and says there are other contingent states of affairs that don't depend upon the God of the Bible, that's simply not true. Now, if they want to try to defend that, let them go ahead and do it, but it cannot be done. Every single skeptic that I speak to, when they attempt to make knowledge statements, those knowledge statements are going to be contingent states of affairs, unless, of course, they are telling me what the ultimacy of reality upon which all possibility comes from. So I ask my skeptic friends, what is the ultimacy of reality from whence you say certain possibilities or contingent states of affairs exist? You know what the answer is? I don't know.
So I asked you what the argument is that nobody can have knowledge outside of the Christian world. And it seemed like your answer, if I'm summarizing it right, was God says so. And then you also said that it can't be done otherwise.
First of all, how else? Okay, without the revelation of God, hold on a second. I'm going to answer you by giving you a question. Okay, right? How do you falsify something?
You would. One way might be that you could see that that thing doesn't correspond with reality. In other words, it's not truthful. So something was not truthful.
Okay, so what you're saying? Okay, so what you are saying, and I agree with you, is you're making an appeal to the law of non-contradiction and excluded middle, right?
In a way, you can say that.
Okay, good. Now, in order to falsify A, you have to say not A. Okay? You can only falsify a proposed state of affairs by pointing to a state of affairs that contradicts it.
Well,
okay?
I think you could falsify it by showing there's many different ways. But one of them would be
No. There's only one way you can falsify something. That's through the law of non-contradiction. Okay? So A cannot equal not A. If you're going to falsify not A, you're going to do so by affirming A. If you're going to falsify A, you have to affirm not A. And say, because A is true, therefore not A is false. If you're going to affirm not A is true, okay, then that means A is false.
Well, it would entail that.
That's how you falsify things. So when I don't have to do quote an inductive survey of other worldviews. You see, basically, there's only two worldviews.
Could you stop tapping?
There's only two. There's only two worldviews: God and not God, and they're just simply different flavors within the not God worldview. They're just variations on the same denial. Okay.
Well, I would say also that the God worldview has many different flavors as well, but that's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, but those are counterfeits.
Well, I mean, I'm not interested in the claim that those are counterfeits. So, let me just say something really quick. So, I'm not only talking about simply falsifying something like a worldview, but also showing that the argumentation in support of the worldview fallacious. In other words, if your justification or support for your worldview is fallacious,
first
then
of all,
gonna
all I have to show is that they're not coherent because they can't establish what the preconditions for intelligibility are. So when they speak and they make knowledge statements, it's Charlie Brown's T-shirt, wah 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 wah. They have no basis.
No, that would be.
Look. Do you understand? When we make propositions, assertions, and predications, okay, they have to be metaphysically intelligible, which means they ultimately make sense in that they are derivative of that which is the ultimacy of reality. Okay? Not talking about semantic intelligibility. Right? Look, let me illustrate for you. Suppose we have two people who have two worldviews, A and not A. Okay?
Yep.
Now, what we have here is a dichotomy, A or not A. Now, let's say that represents two worldviews. If they both utter the predication, the sky is blue, one of those predications is metaphysically unintelligible because the ultimacy of reality upon which it depends does not exist.
All right, can you repeat that, please?
Right. A predication derives its metaphysical intelligibility in that it is specific to a derivative of what the ultimacy of reality is.
Well, I think a predication derives its intelligibility. Anyway, I'm not really interested in talking about it. So you said that
When I say predication, other worldviews are going to be making predications about themselves. Okay, so predications have to be metaphysically intelligible, which means they have to be accounted for in terms of what is the ultimate nature of reality. Now, in the Christian worldview, it's been revealed to us what the ultimate nature of reality. It is God. He is the ultimate nature of reality. He is the creator and sustainer of all things. And he's organized the world in a certain way, and he has a plan for history. Now, when that is rejected and anything comes out of their mouth, then those predications, those propositions, those thoughts, logic, and reasoning are specific to and derivative to their model of reality. Now, how do they account for the model of reality, that it is the case? Not that they believe it, not that they presuppose it. How do they account that it is the case? The point
you might be referring to Munchausen's, but I wanted to talk about something else really quick.
No, I'm talking. Listen, the way we deal with other worldviews is we say that they're incoherent. In other words, they're without support. They're just
An incoherent worldview would be a worldview where they're anything I would say would be tautological.
Incoherency as I'm using it can either refer to it doesn't make any sense at all. There's no root basis for this, or there's a contradiction. So in the Christian worldview is that the Christian worldview is the only coherent worldview. If that's rejected,
I understand that. So can I say something? Okay, so showing that somebody's worldview contains a contradiction, I don't think entails that the worldview is false. So something could have a contradiction.
We're not talking about a contradiction in terms of a contingency. We're talking about the pillars of the ultimacy of that. Now, I can just simply say is, if I told you, what if I said to you, suppose you made an argument to me, it doesn't matter what it is, and suppose I said you're wrong. You say, why are you wrong, why am I wrong, Darth? And I said, because the moon is filled with green cheese. And you say, how does that follow? And I said, I don't know. Now, is that an incoherent response?
If you say
you're wrong because I don't know, or you're right because I don't know.
yeah, that would be incoherent. Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's exactly what the other worldviews are saying. Now, when
Are
we're
you saying
dealing with
all other worldviews reduce to incoherence?
ultimately, even the counterfeits of the
So yes.
Christian God. Hold on. Now, when we're dealing with counterfeits of the Christian worldview, of the Christian God, they're equally incoherent. They're simply listen. They're all just variations of the same thing. They're all ultimately denials of the Christian God. Now, the problem here that most people don't realize is they hold to a pluralistic idea that, well, I don't accept the Christian worldview, but it's possible that other worldviews might provide for metaphysical intelligibility. That's an incoherent notion, because if you're going to reject the Christian worldview, the only worldview that you can appeal to is the one that you're speaking from. You can't appeal to any other worldview because.
Well, you could do an internal critique.
No, an internal critique can only be launched from a coherent worldview. If I do an internal critique of Islam, I'm going to have to do so from a base, from the Christian worldview.
Well, no, I think the point of an internal critique is to step into the other's shoes and see if everything makes sense and follows.
Right. But the point is, when you do an internal critique, you're doing so to expose the incoherence of that worldview. But to do a critique means that there's a coherent worldview to critique from.
Well, you don't really have to critique from a coherent worldview to point out an incoherency in a different worldview.
No,
right?
Wrong. Okay, if you're going to do a reasoned evaluation, that reasoned evaluation has to come from a model of reality. What would that be?
And something else I wanted to say and point out is
I asked you a question. I said, if you're going to do a reasoned analysis,
I
which
wanted to say
includes an
something
internal.
else.
Well, I'd like to finish my question.
You can ask
If you're going to do an internal critique, which is a reasoned analysis, one's worldview is going to have to provide for that.
Provide for what?
To do an internal critique. For example, can I do an internal critique of Islam without there being a worldview that can provide for the metaphysical intelligibility of reason?
I don't think that grounding the metaphysics of reason is something that needs to be established
you're not
to do an internal critique.
You're not getting this, okay?
Well,
An internal critique, okay, is an internal critique of Islam, is that a reasoned process?
Yeah.
Okay. Does a reasoned process have to be done within a model of reality that provides for the metaphysical intelligibility?
I think I would disagree. I think I would say no.
Then there's no basis to reason about anything then.
Well, I don't think that you have to have some metaphysical grounding for reason to actually.
Oh, you are quite naive, my friend. Okay.
Physicalism.
When you invoke possibilities or contingent states of affairs, you're going to have to do so based upon some ultimate nature of reality. If you tell me you don't need an ultimate nature of reality, I've got sad news for you. Possibilities, impossibilities, and contingencies are specific to and derivative of that which is ultimate. Unless, of course, you want to claim that contingent states of affairs just have their origin in just spontaneous things spontaneously happening.
Well,
I can't imagine that.
What I said was that I don't think that it's necessary to give metaphysical grounding for reason in order to use reason.
Okay. Well, yeah, it is necessary.
Okay. Well, I don't think that'll be an interesting conversation.
Well,
Skeptical
yeah,
about,
then what you're saying is
the reason.
reason doesn't. Okay, you see, what you're not understanding is what you're saying is reason doesn't depend upon anything. Now, is that silly?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, does reason depend upon a certain state of affairs? Could you reason in a world where all events are spontaneous?
I don't know.
No, there would be no reason.
Reason for what?
There wouldn't be any causal connections between anything. The idea of thoughts would be meaningless. Okay, sense perception would be meaningless because all events would be discrete and there's no connections between them. Things just happen spontaneous. There's no causal connections or anything to do like that.
What's happening now?
We're talking about one's theory of knowledge and how it relates to one's model of reality and the ultimacy of reality. And my position is that the Christian worldview is the only coherent worldview.
But what about the Jewish worldview?
The contemporary Jewish worldview is ultimately incoherent.
Well, here's the thing. You can use as many big words as you like, and you have your right to your opinion, but unfortunately, if religion is involved, you're fundamentally wrong in terms of progressive science and empirical evidence.
Are you an atheist?
Yes, because I've been in a Christian school and I have seen the rituals and the ridiculousness.
Listen, dude, I don't need a testimony here. Now, what is your brand of atheism? Do you deny?
Well, I personally think that
I'd appreciate if you would not talk over me till I get done with my question.
Okay.
Okay, this is my room, and I have mod powers to mute people who behave very badly.
Well, I did not know that, and I apologize. Please continue to talk.
No problem. Okay, now, I want to know what kind of atheist you are, okay? Are you the kind of atheist that denies the existence of God, or you just have a lack of belief?
I don't think there is any higher power. If there was, it would have made itself known already.
How do you know that?
Because of everything that has happened in the entire world and history of recorded literature and recorded science and all the different religions of the world, 5,000 different instances of a god. I mean, you believe in one more than me, so.
Okay. How long have you been an atheist?
After I got out of 7th grade for a private Christian school, it was like I was singing the songs, I was reading the scripture, I was doing the Bible work, but
well, I don't mean any disrespect, okay? I really don't need a long testimony. I just want to know, how long have you been an atheist?
Probably 20 years.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, I'll ask you very simple questions. Now, just to give you a little bit about me, sometimes I can be very, very blunt. It's nothing personal, right?
That's totally fine. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt.
If somebody gets obnoxious with me or starts trolling me, then I give it back in spades. But hopefully that won't happen. Now, when I ask questions, it's not because I don't know the answer. I'm driving to a point. Okay? Now,
so you claim to know everything?
No. I said I generally don't ask questions that I don't know the answer to. Now, I ask questions because I'm driving to a point. Now, when you assert that if a creator God existed, he would have shown himself, how do you know that a creator God would necessarily show himself?
Well, even if he didn't show himself, you should live your life as if...
That's not an answer to my question. You asserted necessarily that if a creator God existed, he would show himself. How do you know that?
You don't know that, but...
Oh, okay. So what you stated was not a truth claim or a knowledge claim. It was a preference.
I feel like once you've done enough research and you're kind of educated to a certain point, you can kind of logically make decisions.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Now, I'm going to show you that atheism is incoherent. All right? Are you ready?
I don't care if it's incoherent. It makes sense culturally and relevantly.
Okay, wait a minute.
I'm sorry, it's relevant.
You just contradicted yourself.
Okay.
Okay, listen to me. Listen, I'm not here to beat up on you, but I am going to tell you where I think you're wrong. You contradicted yourself. If something is incoherent, then it makes no sense by definition.
Well, the world is incoherent. The entire solar system and universe is
listen.
Random and
I do not expect for you to accept right out of the gate that atheism is incoherent. Okay, I'm going to show you why it's incoherent. All right.
Well, you could show me why it's incoherent. If a god appeared and said, "Hey, I'm a god. I control everything," I'd be like, "Oh shit.
Listen. You atheist. Okay, let me just give you.
You atheists. I feel like that's kind of.
You atheist, and I'm going to say it for a reason. It's because
then you're inciting.
You're over talking me. Okay. Now, many of you atheists in a conversation, you just rapid fire these atheist memes and cliches and slogans.
You do the same thing in religious talk.
Okay, good. Now, all right, we're gonna see how it goes. Now, is your criterion of belief that you withhold or deny the existence of God because God is not rationally justified?
That makes perfect sense. That God is not rationally justified.
Well, I didn't hear.
Because if you grow up,
I'm not looking for an explanation, a testimony, or a lecture. I'm looking for an affirmative or a disconfirmation. Is that your principal criterion, that God has not been rationally justified, therefore you withhold belief or deny his existence?
I believe in the physical laws that govern this world. And in no physical law have I seen any instance of God or creation.
Well, you see, this is why I said you atheist, because what you're doing right now is you're giving me another atheist meme. I asked you a question. Now, remember what I told you before? When I ask a question, 99 times out of 100, I know what the answer is. I'm not looking for information. I'm looking for you to either affirm or not affirm the question. Now,
I personally think you're getting way too bogged down in specifics and using large words to completely blindside people.
Okay. Wells, or how do you say your name? Well?
Well, objectively good.
Okay. Oh, you are correct that it is my MO to blindside you. You're absolutely right.
And I think laterally, so I move from instance to instance.
We're having a conversation here, okay? Now, I asked you a question.
I guess you can talk over me, but whatever.
Okay. I'll try the question again. Is your principled criterion for atheism that God has not been rationally justified, therefore you withhold belief in God? Is that your principled criterion?
I mean, rationally justified in my mind would be if, I mean, you have this thing called jihad, like that. If that concept didn't exist.
Well, do you want me to mute you?
Well, let me help you out here for a second.
No, please wait. No, please be quiet. Well, I don't want to have to server mute you. Now, you need to focus. I asked you a question. One more time. I'm looking for you to affirm or not affirm my question. Is your principled criterion of belief that since God has not been rationally justified, you therefore withhold belief?
I guess yes, if you want to ask yes or no questions.
Good.
With no context?
That's all I wanted to know. Now, is that an arbitrary principle?
I mean, if I were in my freshman philosophy class, I'd be able to keep up with you, but...
Do you know what arbitrary means?
Yes, of course.
Good. Is your criterion to reject God as the ultimacy of reality? Is that an arbitrary criterion?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Okay, so since you withhold belief in God, your capacity to reason, to think, to speak, is not derivative of God. So your capacity to think and reason must be derivative of some other ultimate nature of reality, right?
Yes.
Okay. What is the ultimacy of reality that provides you with the capacity to think and reason?
I mean, what do you mean by that? Like, what drives me personally?
No, I'm not asking you personally. I said you have the capacity to think and reason, and so do I. Since you reject belief in the existence of God, then something else must exist ultimately that provides you with the capacity to reason. What is
He's
the
asking the
ultimacy?
ultimate nature of reality.
Please don't interrupt. I don't need help. What is the ultimacy of reality, or the ultimate nature of reality that provides for that?
I'm trying to comprehend to the extent.
Well, if God doesn't exist, then something must else exist that provides you with the capacity to be alive, think, and reason. What would that be?
We don't know, and we never will know.
Okay, thank you. That's an honest answer. Now you're going to be blindsided. Okay? So you can reason about God because of I don't know.
Well, no, I know that we do not know, and we never will know. I know that
you just missed the question. Do you have the capacity to reason because of I don't know?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, so in other words, you don't have a basis for your capacity to reason, that you can reason.
So only religion is the basis for all morality.
That's okay. My position, since I'm a fundamentalist Christian, is that God is the creator of all things.
Well,
may I finish, please?
No, I want to apologize because we are not going to get along as people because you are a fundamentalist Christian, and I will leave the room now.
Can I ask 2 questions now that you finished with him?
No, I don't want to talk to you, Alexo.
No, I think you're.
I had enough of your filibustering later on. Maybe another day.
Are you done for the day, Darth Dawkins?
Am I done for the day? I don't know. Do you want me to hang around?
I would argue with you from a Gnostic standpoint if you're up for it, but if you've got to leave or sleep.
A Gnostic standpoint?
Yeah.
What's that standpoint?
I'm certain of the existence of God, but I would argue against your fundamentalist Christian viewpoint.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me about your God.
Omniscient, but neither omnipotent or omnipresent.
Oh, okay. So he's not omnipotent.
No.
Okay. So what else does he's not omnipotent, and what else?
Not omnipresent, as in everywhere at once.
Okay. What about omniscient?
It's omniscient, yes.
That would explain the problem of pain.
Okay. So, well, here's the problem. If you're God, you've already gone on record. Okay. Now, is this a sincere belief that you hold?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as I said earlier, the Christian worldview is the only coherent worldview because of the existence of the Christian God and his properties and attributes. Now, you stated that your God is not omnipotent. Now, if your God is not omnipotent, then he cannot guarantee that he gives you infallible revelation.
No, that would be omniscience.
No, omnipotence would he might be able to know everything, but one would have to be omnipotent in order to guarantee infallible revelation.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, then I'll have to go over it again with you. Omnipotence is a necessary prerequisite for infallible and inerrant revelation, along with omniscience and a nature that is always truth revealing. So
but why is omnipotence necessary?
Because without it, there's no guarantee that revelation has gotten there correctly and infallibly.
But how so?
I've already explained it to you. I'll go over it again. Now, if your God is not omnipotent, then you have no way to account for example, the uniformity of nature. An omnipotent God, and along with his omniscience and always truth revealing, can account for the uniformity of nature. Without omnipotence, you don't have any basis to establish or account for the uniformity of nature and the revelation that would be guaranteed through his omnipotence to get to you.
Explain uniformity of nature. What do you mean by that?
The uniformity of nature is that nature operates according to some laws.
Why is God a necessary prerequisite for that?
Why? Because the God of the Bible says he is.
Oh, okay. So it's circular logic. Okay.
Oh well. Do you object to epistemic circularity?
What is epistemic circularity?
Epistemic circularity is an appeal to one's ultimate authority. Do you object to that in principle? You better think very carefully about that question.
I am currently thinking.
Good. Either you accept or reject epistemic circularity in principle, or you don't know.
What is it?
I refute circular logic.
I didn't ask you about circular logic. I asked you about epistemic circularity. Epistemic circularity is a final, ultimate appeal to one's ultimate authority. Epistemic circularity is not the same thing as a circular argument.
So why do they call it? Hold on, let me look this up so I can get the definition.
Okay.
Darth, do you believe anything is self-evident?
I'd like, do I believe that anything is self-evident? Yes, the existence of God is self-evident.
Okay.
Okay, so what is your name? I'll just call you 110, okay? 110, I'm waiting for an answer to the question. Do you object to epistemic circularity?
I'm reading about epistemic
okay.
circularity.
Okay, I'll translate. Okay, epistemic circularity is an appeal to one's ultimate authority, and only the ultimate authority can verify that it is the ultimate authority. Okay? So do you object to that in principle?
I don't like the fact that you're forcing the argument while I'm trying to learn what the definition is.
I just explained to you what epistemic circularity is.
I don't consider your
okay,
argument
Alec,
sincere.
I will define how I'm using it. Epistemic circularity.
Give me 1 minute, or not 1 minute, but 3 minutes, and I'll finish reading this and I'll answer your question. How about that?
You sure you don't want me to ask what I was going to ask, or are you dealing with this guy?
Yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow, Alexo, if you want.
So I was just going to ask, what would stop a Muslim follower of Islam, a Muslim, just replacing what you're saying as a worldview for the Christian worldview being the self-evidently ultimacy of the universe? What's stopping them saying no? It's actually Allah's worldview is correct, and the Christian one is just the counterfeit, like you described.
Allah is incoherent. He's self-contradictory.
Why is that? Why can't the same argument be made from a Muslim perspective?
Well, because first of all, let's answer the question. Okay, Allah is claimed to be omniscient. Allah is claimed to be the infallible author of the Quran. Okay, in Surah 4 and Surah 5, Allah gets the teaching of the Trinity wrong. That's just for starters. Why did Allah get the teaching of the Trinity wrong? Okay, in Surah 4 and 5, it stipulates that the Christian doctrine of the Trinity is that Allah is a God, Jesus is a God, and Mary is a God.
Right.
Now, the Christians never taught that, ever. Now, how did Allah get the doctrine wrong? Oops, that's right. Muhammad was illiterate and he only knew about Christian doctrine through word of mouth. So through whatever oral communications, he misunderstood when people would say that Mary was the mother of God. And why were they saying that? Because people were saying that Jesus didn't have the attributes of God. So
right.
Muhammad didn't understand this. And so he cluelessly referred to the Trinity, that Allah is a God. First of all, the Christians never said even that God the Father is a God, Jesus is a God, and the Holy Spirit is a God. Christians never even taught that. The Christians taught there is one God, one being, but that there are three personas eternally linked within the unity of God in eternity. That God is multi-personal within his unity. The Christians always taught this from the first century. So how did Muhammad get that wrong? The Quran affirms the Christian scriptures over and over and over again. It reprimands Christians for making oral bad teachings, and admonishes them to go back to the Christian book, the Christian scriptures, which is the New Testament.
Yeah, I have heard that criticism. How it's like sort of
and so the only escape the Muslims have is to say, oh well, the Christians corrupted the Bible. They have no forensic support for that for whatsoever, because we have copies of the New Testament that have all the doctrinal statements of Jesus about his identity claims that long predate Muhammad and the Quran. So you see, they're going to have to time index when the Christian scriptures were not just corrupted but obliterated. In other words, there were no original. When I say original copies, there were no unadulterated copies around. Because you see, when the Quran was written, it affirms the Christian scriptures. So if at the time of the writing, if the Muslims say, oh, the Christian scriptures were corrupted and adulterated in the 3rd century or the 4th century, what that simply means is there were no extant copies that were unperverted with respect to the numerous identity claims of Jesus and doctrinal positions that flat out contradict the Quran.
Right.
So the Muslims have to say that these are adulterated interpolations corrupted by the Christians. But when did this occur? Okay, so they're screwed.
If I may interrupt, I do refute
Please, go ahead.
epistemic circularity.
Good, then you're screwed too.
I have
Because
an interesting.
if you reject epistemic circularity, then that means that you cannot appeal to an ultimate authority. If you can't appeal to an ultimate authority, how are you going to make knowledge statements?
Why can't I appeal to the existence of a higher power based on my own reasoning?
Okay, you're still appealing. Then your reason would be the ultimate authority.
What does that mean?
Okay, well, let's take, for example, the Christian worldview. In the Christian worldview, God is the ultimate authority, the final court of appeal. My reason would be in submission to what God reveals and communicates, because he's the ultimate authority. And how do I know he's the ultimate authority? Because he reveals that he's the ultimate authority. And there cannot be another ultimate authority that he is the ultimate authority. Only the ultimate authority can be self-verified. There is no other way. Now,
but his own verification is logically inconsistent because of omnipotence.
What does that mean?
Do you believe in free will?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you agree that human beings possess power?
Do we have agency? Yes.
Well, if we have any sort of agency, then that logically concludes that God is not omnipotent. He's just extremely powerful.
No. How does agency mitigate against God's omnipotence?
Because if someone has agency that you do not have, that means that there is agency that you do not have. Therefore,
No, that you don't understand the biblical notion of omnipotence. Okay? Are you defining omnipotence as that God has no limitations? Because that's not the biblical definition of omnipotence. Okay, and in fact, if you hold to the definition that omnipotence entails no limit, well, before I get to the punchline, do you hold that omnipotence entails no limitations?
essentially,
Okay, do you understand that that's an incoherent notion?
it's not.
I will explain it to you.
Are you talking about? I'm not
Okay,
saying God can do something that's not like
Let
that
me,
is
okay,
syntax.
listen. A definition of omnipotence that entails no limitations is a logical incoherency and contradiction. Okay?
It's all power.
Okay, listen,
Well,
you're
having a lot
not,
of power.
okay, let me explain something to you. You are making the common mistake that people have. You are assuming that in order to be omnipotent, that it necessarily entails no limitations. That is logically incoherent, and I'm going to
Are you
unpack
going
that
to
for you.
talk about?
I'm
squaring
going
the
to
triangle?
unpack it for you.
Are you
okay?
talking about squaring the triangle?
Okay, now, what I'm saying to you is, for example, when we talk about in the classical concept of God in philosophy, as God having great-making properties, by definition, whatever God's great-making properties are, okay, they are negation of another state of affairs. So to possess any properties is a denial of their negation. Okay? So
That's circular logic.
no, it's not circular. You just, okay. Why is, you know what blows my mind? What really makes my head want to explode is that when I state something that either somebody doesn't agree with or they don't understand, they say it's circular. And he left. Oh, gee. Circular reasoning is where you smuggle the conclusion into the premise. Okay, that would be for an argument. But the point is, it cannot apply to epistemic circularity because if you're going to appeal to an ultimate authority, it's going to entail circularity. If you reject that in principle, then you can't appeal to any authority because what's going to establish it?
But is it circular reasoning or just positing some sort of axiom? Is the axiom circular reasoning?
Well, kind of, but the point is, axioms would just be unjustified starting points, okay? And a lot of unbelievers realize they have to start from that. So in other words, what they're conceding to is their whole system of thought, their whole line of reasoning and logic, all their knowledge statements come down to elementary ideas about existence for which they had no justificatory path. They just have to start with them because otherwise they can't make sense of anything.
But isn't that kind of a justification on its own?
It's a pathetic one.
Well, when you say that it's necessary that God exists to make sense of anything, it seems like a similar comparison there.
No, not at all. You see, when we say in order to make sense of everything, okay, how shall I explain this to you? And it's not always easy to understand, but it's not all that difficult to understand. Okay. In order for me to know things, to make sense of things, there has to be a reference point. You understand? And God is that reference point. Okay. He's the all conditioner. He's the one who interprets all facts, right? And so to the degree that we think God's thoughts after him, we can know things. Now, if we deny the existence of God, how do we establish that anything is a fact? Why? Because we intently believe it. A fact is only what it is in relation to all other states of affairs, but we don't know all other states of affairs.
What about empiricism?
Empiricism, you mean you when you say empiricism, what do you mean?
I think what he means is
okay, hold on a
gaining
second.
knowledge through observation.
Okay, okay, and do you mean that empiricism to mean that the only way to know things is through sense perception?
Not. I mean, that's a kind of a loaded way to say it. It's
Well,
more empirical. It's
that,
through observation, right? Like that's.
Right, no, and all right, listen. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just
I know.
just getting clarification here. Empiricism is the metaphysical notion that the only way to know things, or the only way for propositions to be meaningful, is if they are the product of sense perception.
That's not
Is that what you're talking about?
I would wholeheartedly disagree with that. There's definitely
by the way, whoever said that's not true, you don't know what you're talking about. And you must not confuse empiricism with empirical. Okay? And empiricism is the metaphysical position, the only way
I'll explain why I disagree.
to know. No, listen, there's no debate here. Okay?
Right, I'll explain why
listen, empiricism, yeah, but you can try, but it won't work. Okay, empiricism is the metaphysical position that the only way to know things is through sense perception. That's called empiricism. Now,
right, so can I go now?
What about materialistic empiricism?
Okay, go ahead, Chum.
Okay, so I'm just reading off of the Wikipedia definition for empiricism here. So in philosophy, empiricism is a theory that states that knowledge comes only or primarily from sense experience. So in other words, you don't have to make the statement that knowledge can only come through sense experience to be an empiricist, only that the primary source of knowledge comes through sense perception.
In philosophy, when you use empiricism in philosophy, it means that the only meaningful statements are those that come through sense perception. Empiricism is closely related to positive, logical positivism and verificationism. Okay. Now, first of all, Wikipedia is not always a good source to go to because anybody
can go to Plato.
You could, but you're quibbling over anything. The bottom line is,
well, I'm giving
the question is it his view that the only way to know things is through sense perception? Because there's two options here.
Well, that's a false view.
May I finish, please? Let me finish, please. Okay, this is an issue I've debated on numerous occasions. Okay,
but you're wrong on it.
One's view. You know what? You're beginning to piss me off.
Okay.
Okay. Now, one will either say that knowledge only is viable and meaningful through sense perceptions alone, or that some knowledge comes through sense perception. So you have an option here. Either all knowledge comes through sense perception or some. Okay? Empiricism regularly refers to the first position because everybody holds to the second position. But not everybody is an empiricist. Okay, empiricism does not have to do with the same thing as empirical endeavors. One is not an empiricist or hold to empiricism if they believe that some knowledge comes through sensory perception. Okay, otherwise everybody would be an empiricist.
Darth, what is the difference between revelation and empirical observations?
Well, empirical observation would be where you have a sense perception, and then because of your web of beliefs that you have about reality, you cognitively filter and interpret those sense perceptions. Revelation is God communicating either indirectly through his creative acts or directly through special revelation, such as oral communication or the type of inspiration that guided the biblical authors to write the text of the Bible.
But revelation based on his revelatory acts, as in the creation, all that would entail sense perception, wouldn't it?
Well, from the Christian worldview, all acts of creation are revelatory. Okay? Now
Right.
the question comes in is we then subdivide that into natural revelation and special revelation. So, for example, when Adam opened up his eyes and he saw a bird, that was a natural revelation. When the Apostle Paul wrote down the book of Romans and he penned down the very words without error, that was God's providential inspiration, which was a direct revelation.
Darth Dawkins.
Yeah.
If the claim that you make is that everything that exists is some kind of revelation from God, could something exist that is not revelation of God? How is that statement meaningful?
Everything. For example, suppose you see a billboard for, let's say, Coca-Cola. Okay. Now, did God make that sign? No. But did God make all of the atoms? Did God make physics? Did God make the light waves? Did God make your eyeballs and your sensory apparatus and your cognition?
Right.
So
that's what I meant to ask you.
If somebody rearranges the matter that God made into a different form, like let's say a potter takes some clay from the side of the lake, and it's still a revelation, because the very clay in the pot which had been transformed, the clay is a product of the potter's eyesight, his cognition, everything. So it's all an indirect revelation because it's derivative of God's creative acts.
Right. This is the exact same thing as grandfather's acts, but you're kind of agreeing with me then that there's nothing that exists that isn't God's revelation. So how is it then meaningful to say that everything that exists is God's revelation?
How is it meaningful to?
Yeah.
How is it? It's meaningful because everything is a creative act of God. Just look. If you look, let me ask you a question. If you look on at the Mona Lisa, is that a revelatory act of Leonardo da Vinci?
What do you mean by revelatory?
It means it's a creative act and it communicates something.
I don't know if it's anything. It's art. I'm not sure if I can access Leonardo's intentions.
You don't have to have words to communicate.
But how do I know that he meant to communicate something by making
So
a painting?
it has nothing to do with what he meant. The point is simply this: is that people don't have a broad enough understanding of what revelation means. Okay, they want to think of revelation only as special revelation, but from a biblical theological perspective, revelation entails God's creative acts, and that is subdivided into natural revelation, all of the things God naturally created, like man's cognition, man's memory, man's eyeballs, water, birds, things like that. And then there's special revelation, where we distinguish that from natural revelation. So the fact that I know that God created the world in 6 days is special revelation, but it's not natural revelation. But the very paper that it's on, the ink, the atoms, my eyeballs, all of those things right there are a form of natural revelation, although with the way they are combined is special revelation.
How old do you think the world is and the universe is?
It's as old as the Bible says it is. It's anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 years. You see, the funny thing is you unbelievers have been so duped at thinking that modern man, because we have made so many advances, can't be wrong in their retrodictions. And because these retrodictions are in actuality metaphysical statements, they get deceived because they think, because they come with scientific nomenclature, that therefore it almost guarantees their truth. And they don't realize. You see, the more people get into studying biology and geology, people learn, especially the philosophy of science, people realize science is not this accurate domain that they think it is.
All right, so I had a different question if you'd like to switch gears for a second. I think this
Well,
might be a
really,
little bit
really quick, before we switch gears, really quick, I'd just like to challenge that point that, like, it's only the scientific nomenclature that leads any credence, because it's the scientific method, Darth. Science is repeatable.
Listen, you're misunderstanding what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the historical retrodictions that come laden with scientific nomenclature. I'm not talking about people who observe, test, and repeat, because historical retrodictions going back into the distant past is not the same thing as the declarations of observation, testing, and repeatability in the present.
Okay, but how is that relevant to this argument?
Well, when it comes to the age of the Earth, that's a retrodiction. It's not something that is subject to observation, testing, and repeatability. So let's take, for example, the Grand Canyon with its numerous sedimentary layers, okay? Now, we come along, we make an empirical observation that there are very tall and many layers of sedimentary layers. Now, if somebody says, well, you see, these sedimentary layers, it says all the school kids, all these layers took millions, if not billions of years to form.
I mean, I would say the USGS disagrees.
It doesn't matter what the consensus says, because if you actually study what is called the philosophy of science, what you will find is that science is governed by what are called paradigms, okay? One of the greatest philosophers of science in the history of science was a man by the name of Thomas Kuhn, and he wrote a monumental work called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And this was his specific point, and it's never been challenged, okay? Because it's true. Science is governed by overarching paradigms, which themselves are not empirical conclusions, but are metaphysical positions dressed up in scientific nomenclature. Okay?
I mean, I can't speak for Hume, but I would say science is governed by the scientific method, which would be very Lockean, I guess, because the scientific method is based on empirical observation.
You're not understanding this issue in the philosophy of science. Okay. Science operates under a paradigm, how they see the world, what the model of reality is. And so when there are discrete events or phenomenon, they are interpreted through that paradigm. Okay, let me just give you a brief illustration. Okay, when you wake up tomorrow, if you wake up early and you get a cup of coffee and you watch the sunrise, are you going to think that the sun is orbiting the Earth? George?
If I wake up tomorrow and get a cup,
and you get up and you watch the sunrise. As you watch the sunrise, are you going to say to yourself that the sun is orbiting the Earth?
Yes, I mean, I think I could believe that.
Oh, you believe?
Well, I think the observation of it rising, along with other observations I've made,
George. No, you're not, George. You are not going to interpret that the sun is orbiting the Earth.
You can do that through.
Listen, George,
relative to the Earth.
Listen to me. I'm getting to a philosophical point that you're not getting. I'm talking about how a paradigmatic commitment interprets sensory phenomena. There was a time, going back many hundreds of years, where people had the almost identical observation of the sun rising. Okay? They had a paradigm that the sun was going around the earth. Okay? So they had an idea and they interpreted the phenomenon according to the paradigm. Now, in the year 2018, people no longer believe, unless there's some wacko flat earther, that the sun is orbiting the earth. They believe that the earth is rotating on its axis, okay? And that the sun has a appearance of orbiting the earth from that vantage point. Okay. So
sorry, yeah, I misunderstood. I agree.
Okay,
yeah.
so if you read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Kuhn, or if you read the book called The Web of Belief by W.V. Quine, another philosopher of science, okay, science is not in this business of making clean, pristine interpretations. Okay, if you can't take anything else, you take this away, you'll learn a lot. In science and empiricism, all observations are inherently theory-laden. Do you understand that?
Are inherently what?
All observations in empirical endeavors are inherently theory-laden. Okay?
Theory-laden?
Theory-laden. In other words, there are no neutral and objective observations. There are sense perceptions. Those sensory perceptions are then filtered and processed cognitively based upon our web of beliefs. Within our web of beliefs,
I would challenge on a few things.
Well, hold on.
I mean, if we put,
I want to explain to whoever said the web of beliefs is.
That's awesome, Darth, and let's get into that. But before we go too far ahead, I'd like to make sure that I don't have a notepad on me, man. So I'd rather not have to write down a bullet point list of stuff I'd have to reply. I just would like to reply to these one at a time. I mean, what I was thinking is that, yes, if I was Copernicus, way back when, and I was standing at the shore watching the sunrise, and I noticed the tide going out, one could think, maybe the Earth does revolve around the sun. You know what I mean? Like, but that's empirical observation, right? Like, it's all based on the scientific method.
Now, okay, listen. George, let me explain something to you. The people that I have the most difficulty with on Discord, this isn't an attack upon you or anyone else. The people who object to the kinds of statements that I'm making the most are those people who know the least about the basics of the philosophy of science. Okay? Not about science, the philosophy of science. Okay?
I mean, it's been a while, but I did take a class.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, then you should know these things that I'm telling you. Okay? Now, when somebody has a sensory experience, they have a network of beliefs that they filter and interpret that sense experience. Now, in those web of beliefs, there are foundational beliefs that have priority that give rise to higher beliefs. Now, in that web of beliefs are what we call paradigms on how we see the world and how phenomenon and events and sensory occurrences are to be interpreted. Okay? And so what people don't realize is that all scientific pronouncements, whether we consider them true or not, are the products of our paradigm. Now, when it comes to retrodictions about the past, they too are not free from paradigms. Because you see, people who don't know the philosophy of science don't think. They think that the pronouncements on the age of the earth are just as scientific about what'll happen if you put a blasting cap into C4. They're not the same. One is called operational science. The other is historical science.
I was just going to say, like, what your argument you're setting up so far about, like, obviously people used to believe that the sun went around the Earth, and then Galileo came along and proved otherwise with science. Is like that same argument is used against what you still believe, that the Earth is what did you say, 6 to 20,000 years old, and since then scientists have come along with proof that evidently it's not. It's much older. But you're
okay, good. Could you tell me what that proof is?
There's fossils. There's something called redshift theory in physics.
Okay, good. Can you tell me why the dead bones and imprints of dead animals proves that the Earth is millions of years old?
Oh, there's this thing called carbon dating.
Oh,
you can actually
good.
Find out how old something is.
Oh, okay, good. You just demonstrated your own ignorance. Okay. Now, do you understand that? Well, I'll explain it to you.
Here we go.
Okay. Carbon dating is not used to date fossils. Carbon dating is used to date organic material that is either animal or plant life that has ingested carbon-14. Okay. To see how old it is. What you're confusing to see what you're okay. Well, please don't overtalk me. Okay. Now, what you're referring to is not carbon dating, but what is called radiometric isotope dating. Now, you see, you have been propagandized by the scientific community because you had never been told the contrary evidence, because there's a stranglehold by the elites of old Earthism. Now, when it comes to radiometric isotope dating, do you know what the fundamental assumptions are of radiometric isotope dating when they date rocks?
I mean, I was.
Well, you told me it proves it, right? Do you know? Are there any assumptions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a specialist in it. I'm just aware of.
Oh well, you told me that there's proof in dating methods. So you obviously, I corrected you about the carbon dating. So obviously, you must be referring to radiometric isotope dating.
Than what I thought.
Well, is radiometric isotope dating proof of how old rocks are?
We're talking about fossils, right?
Is radiometric isotope dating proof of how old mineralized fossils are?
I think that's the consensus, yeah.
Oh, okay. Does a consensus mean that something's true?
Well, if it can appeal to the evidence that it.
Okay. Well, look. Listen. Does it listen? Dude, listen to me. You are so out of your league. You don't know what you're talking about. Now I'll ask you the question again. Does a consensus of opinion guarantee that conclusion is
I would never
true?
Use consensus alone, of course.
Oh, okay, good. Now, what are conclusions called in the philosophy of science? Are they called truth?
What was that? Sorry, what
are in the philosophy of science when they make conclusions? Are they called truth? Can you tell me what they're called?
In the philosophy of science.
Theory.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they're like theories are either false or true.
No, they're called provisional conclusions. Science. Okay, what you don't know. Now, let me ask you this question. You said science proves how old the Earth is. Now, can you please explain to me? Have you ever heard of Science magazine? It's one of the most prestigious scientific publications called Science. Okay.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
Right. It's one of the more prestigious scientific magazines around. Okay, it's been around for God knows how long. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, somebody wrote in and said science proves this, science proves that, and one of the subscribers, wrote in a letter. Was very upset with the editor, and he said to the editor of the magazine, "Why did you let that fly? Science is not in a position to prove anything. Any conclusions scientists make are provisional conclusions and are subject to refutation, revision, or change based upon a re-examination of the data or new observation that may falsify it." Now, what do you think the editor's response was?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, his response was an absolute apology, and he said, "We blew it, and we should have pointed out that science doesn't prove anything. Any conclusions we have are always provisional, no matter how convinced people are that they happen to be true. Okay? So what you say are proven, the editor of Science magazine agreed with the letter writer that science is not in the business of proving things, because tomorrow a new observation could falsify something. Truth is a domain of metaphysics. Proof is a domain of mathematics.
Isn't that kind of just presupposing an anti-realist idea about science? And that
I'm not holding to anti-realism. I'm simply pointing out that people who actually know little of the philosophy of science are the ones that are quick to tout the achievements of science and what science proves this, science proves that. It hasn't at all. Do you know what instrumentationalism is, Alex?
Yes.
Alex, do you know what that is?
No, I haven't heard of that.
I do.
Okay, good. I'm glad somebody does. You can confirm it. Now, Stephen Hawking was an instrumentalist. You know what that means?
Yes.
It means for all we.
He was an anti-realist. Yeah.
I was gonna explain it, but I guess
Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking held to the position, and I'm not citing him that he could be right, he could be wrong. I'm just telling you what the position is. For all we know, that our ideas about the laws of nature and even cosmological constant could all be wrong. But insofar as they keep on giving us consistent results without fail, they're useful, and we'll continue to use them. Okay? But that doesn't mean that they're proven.
No, but
now, do you know that Newton's law of gravitation? Newton's laws of gravitation were considered proven until they started picking up anomalies. Okay? And so the first thing that came out is, well, wait a minute. Maybe this data is incorrect. Or maybe there's another planet out there like Vulcan that's causing these perturbations. Okay? But then we realized when Einstein came along that Einstein's theory of relativity gave a much more accurate predictions to a number of decimal points more accurate than Newton's laws of gravitation, which means that Newton's laws of gravitation ultimately were wrong. But they serve a utility on a larger scale. Listen, no, but the point I'm trying to make to you is this: on a larger scale, Newton's laws are useful because the errors in it are just not noticeable. They're negligible. But on a smaller scale, they're wrong. But you see, years ago, people say, "Oh, Newton's laws of gravitation have been proven." But were they proven? No, they were not. And in fact, Einstein. Okay, for example, here's another thing. You say fossils prove the age of the Earth. Do you know who Karl Popper was in the philosophy of science?
Yes.
Okay, don't give it away. Alex, do you know who he was?
I have heard of him.
Okay, Karl Popper was one of the leading philosophers of science in the 20th century. He had monumental influence. And Karl Popper championed. Okay, let's test mythic. What was Karl Popper's claim to fame? What did he champion? Begins with an F.
Is only finite? Is that?
No. He championed the falsification demarcation.
Right.
Okay. Now, why did Alex? If science proves things, why did Karl Popper champion that falsification was the demarcation between science and non-science if we could prove things? Because if you prove things, that's verifying things or verification. Because you know why? It's because one of the greatest philosophers of science, Karl Popper, said science doesn't verify things. Now that seems okay. Good. Now that seems at odds. No, what happens is
watch out, man. He's powering up.
We're speaking at a level where, like, our ability to.
But wait a minute. I'm getting to a point here. Okay, listen. The point I'm trying to get is you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to science. Now, Karl Popper said, since we can't ultimately and actually verify conclusions, we can make provisional conclusions and even have a consensus around it. But those conclusions are never verified. So Popper said, we got to come up with a demarcation, and that it wasn't verification or proving things. It was called the falsification criterion. Why is that? Because a theory is presented to explain significant phenomenon, and when that theory passes through a gauntlet of tests, and it is not falsified, then it lives on another day and it is closer to the truth. He says, but we never arrive that something is proven or true. So when you say that the fossils prove evolution, you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to evolution. Now, you may be correct in saying that there's an appeal to fossils to justify evolution, but the fossils don't prove it. Now, I'll ask you this question.
So is this just a semantical issue of
No, it's not just a semantical issue. What it means is you don't understand evolution. You don't understand the philosophy of science. Now, I'll ask you this question. Okay, I'll ask you this question. Does the fossil record exemplify stasis or transition? Which is it?
What was that? Sorry, does fossil?
Yeah, the fossil record in regards to evolution and the age of the Earth. Does the fossil record exemplify stasis or transition?
Like, what do you mean by like?
Well, you told me the fossil record proves, the date of the Earth, right? So does the fossil record, in terms of evolution and Earth's age, does it exemplify stasis or transition?
I mean, I'm not that knowledgeable on that. I mean, I can look into it. Like, I mean, obviously, like.
Do you think the fossil record demonstrates that there's been a universe? Okay, do you think the fossil record? Okay, do you think?
This is the monologue.
Do you think the fossil record?
A question like that, and they have little
It's
prior,
yeah, you don't know.
Alexo ego. This isn't something you could really research. This is your interpretation of the facts.
Now, Alexa, I'm going to ask you this question.
No, I'm
does
just
the
saying,
fossil record?
Okay,
let me. Oh, okay, good. Well, you see, you want to make bold assertions about what the fossils prove. Now, do the fossil record, does it demonstrate that there's a universal common ancestry?
Do the fossils demonstrate?
Does the fossil record prove evolution?
Not by themselves. No, we're talking about the age of the Earth here, right?
No. I ask you, does the fossil record show that there is evolution, a universal common ancestry?
Not by themselves, no.
Then what else shows that there is a universal common ancestry? What would you appeal to?
DNA.
See, I've actually studied evolution.
DNAs, ERVs.
Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, ERVs. Yeah, you don't want to go with ERVs. Trust me. Because they've been wrong before about those genetic sequences. Okay, does junk DNA ring a bell? Whoever said ERVs?
Well, yeah, junk DNA is a colloquial term, not a scientific term.
Okay. Really? Okay. Why is it that Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project, you ever heard of Francis Collins?
Does it matter?
Yeah, it does matter. You ever heard of him?
Why? I'm very familiar with him. Why does it matter?
Yeah, well, Francis Collins holds a number of prestigious scientific positions in the United States. He was selected to be the head of the Human Genome Project. Okay. Now, in his book, The Language, DNA, the Language of God, and by the way, he's a strong believer in the theory of evolution, he stated that categorically that 80% of the human genome was in fact junk DNA.
And that was a popular science book, so what's your point?
No, my point is he's characterizing the scientific nature of those sections. In other words, if he was actually technical, he could say, well, it's just an accumulation of non-protein coding regions that have no regulatory effect whatsoever. So he, instead of saying that, he just said it's junk DNA. And in
Right.
fact,
It's a
you can
colloquial
Google
term.
jump DNA. Jump DNA. No, it's a scientific term.
You're actually proving our point and not yours.
Anyway.
How do you know he was using it colloquially and not, or scientifically, not colloquially?
Pokemon Pat, do I know you?
Yep.
Pokemon Pat, are you there?
What about the anthropic principle?
Hold on a second. Are you there, Pokemon Pat? Anybody hearing him?
I heard him
They
say,
are.
there he is. Did say yeah.
Yeah, he's flashing, but he's not coming through.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, I think I know what that is. Okay, so anyway, let's get back to evolution, Alexa. Okay. So what other evidence proves evolution, Alexa?
I mean, Charles Darwin's book is a pretty key term on the.
Well, that's not a proof. That's simply an explanation of early understanding.
Okay, Charles Darwin said, in 100 years, if the fossil record doesn't bear out my theories, my theory will be falsified. Now, do you realize that?
But it did.
No, it did not.
No, absolutely it did.
Okay, hold on a second. Who said it did?
There are major gaps in the fossil
record.
record.
Whoa. Hold on a second. Who said it did?
Several of us. I was one of them.
Oh, Van the Man, you're not welcome to the room. You're a troll.
Everybody knows fossils prove it. What are you talking about?
If you take a look at the fossil record, there should be intermediaries between species.
Now
we have tons of those.
Okay.
We have tons of
now,
intermediaries.
Alexa. Now, Charles Darwin's book didn't prove anything. He simply popularized and plagiarized the theory of transmutation from several other authors, and he robbed the theory, the idea of what is called natural selection, which is not the same idea that people have for natural selection and evolution, from one of his other scientific associates. His name escapes me at the moment. It's Alfred Russel Wallace. Okay.
Is that the same? Is the same true with Albert Einstein? I heard he plagiarized it. Well, do you
Okay. I have no comment on Einstein. The point is this: Charles Darwin was a liar. He was a plagiarist. He ripped off other people's theories, and he got credit for it. And his book, The Origin of the Species, didn't prove anything. All it did was popularize an idea that through small incremental changes over a long period of time, a universal common ancestry. He didn't demonstrate that at all. Now, the fossil record in and of itself, it exemplifies what is called stasis, means things stay the same rather than transition. And oh, by the way, do you know who said that? That was Stephen Jay Gould, one of the foremost evolutionists in the world. He said one of the trade secrets of paleontologists is that there are no transitional forms. Now, when creationists started quoting him, then he started to backpedal and said, well, we have some very good examples of transitional forms. But the damage had already been done. There are a handful of disputable transitional forms, but on the whole, the fossil record exemplifies stasis. How do I know this? Because Stephen, hold on a second.
It's real good that someone that doesn't actually understand evolution is just saying this shit, you know?
If you look at, well, even if he doesn't, which I believe he does to a certain degree, if not very well, if you look at the transition, no, listen, if you look at the transitional species that they found, they are singular species. There's not intermediates between the intermediates. Look, think about this. No. Listen. Think. If evolution works by a slow series, if it works by a slow series of mutations within creatures, then we should have incremental change over a long period of time, and we should have many of those, but we don't. We have jumps. We don't have that.
Okay, hold on.
Prove that. We do not have that.
Let me correct
It
you.
means change.
Let me correct you. If evolution is true, then all fossils are evidence of intermediary forms.
No, they're not.
Yes,
We
yes, that's
don't have
exactly
the-
true.
All right. So can you
Yeah, that's
show
true.
me?
No, but that
Can
is
you show me definitely? Can you show me how you go from a shark to a stingray, which is something they hold up as evidence of evolution all the time? Can you show me evidence of a shark going to a stingray?
Look,
Well,
evolution
not.
says that.
How about the
really asking
evolution
for
of the peppered
exactly?
moth?
I am asking for
of a
evidence
species will never
that
not be that
slow.
species.
I'm
according to
asking for
evolution.
evidence. I am asking for evidence that slow, steady mutations can change one species into another. That's what I'm asking for.
Just look. Just
No,
Google speciation.
no, there's
Are you
not.
asking for a
Literally,
videotape?
Like
I don't understand what you're asking
tons
for
of
exactly.
speciation events under laboratory conditions.
Yeah, flies.
What about the
Yeah,
peppered moth?
we've only been doing research in this long enough to observe it in something that reproduces extremely rapidly, like
But
flies.
the fossil record does not demonstrate.
What about the
those
peppered moth?
changes.
That's like 20 years of observation, man. That's lifetime level, man. That's not. Yeah, it's observable. Evolution is observable. Like natural selection is
Microevolution
directly
is
observable.
There's no
What?
difference
Minor
between
changes,
micro
but
and macro.
exactly.
You just agreed with evolution.
Yes,
Oh
exactly.
no, no! I think no. You can observe a virus. You can observe a virus mutating. Mutation is not something I'm against.
Just put
I'm
the gun
against
in your mouth and
macro
hold the trigger.
evolution. The
There
idea
is no
that a
difference
species
between
can
micro
become
and
another.
macroevolution.
Oh, there's
You
a
know, if you
huge
have
difference.
a
There's
little
a
bit of
huge
microevolution and some more microevolution, it becomes macroevolution.
So what's
No, okay.
Only
the
we
difference
cannot
between 1 plus
demonstrate.
1 meaning 2 and 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 sequencing up to 1,000? Is there any reason to think that 1 plus
There's
1 continuing infinitely would not lead to 1,000?
Yeah. We
Okay,
don't
well, you
have
you
the
just
bone
denied math.
structures. No.
I asked you if there's a reason to think that adding 1 plus 1 together ad infinitum would stop before
That is
1,000,
irrelevant
and
to
you
this
said
discussion
yes.
because that
No,
is
it's
not
not.
an accurate representation of this
Perfectly
situation.
relevant.
No,
It
this
pretty
is
much
not.
is.
That is not an accurate representation of this situation.
Okay, in what way is 1 plus 1 adding to 1,000, if you continue this, is disanalogous from microevolution leading to?
Good question.
If you're saying it's disanalogous, I want you to point out the disanalogy.
The disanalogy is the changes that we've seen on a microscopic scale. Do not turn said.
Begging the question.
No, I'm not. How am I begging the question?
How do they not eventually lead?
Right, I'm asking you how they don't.
How do they
it.
not?
You're saying they don't do it. You're begging the
How
question.
do they not do it? They do not do it because we have not observed them doing it.
That's actually
okay. So you're saying I haven't seen it, therefore
No,
it doesn't happen.
no. You don't get it.
You just did the
You're
no
making
black swan fallacy.
claim. You're making a claim that microevolution and macroevolution are the same thing. I'm making a claim that they're not, and I'm basing that on the fact that the changes we've observed on a microscopic scale are minuscule and do not turn the.
I'm asking you where the disanalogy is.
Where the disanalogy is, a shark cannot be a stingray.
Begging the
They're
question.
two separate things.
Okay.
Right. That's
Yeah, we know that.
But you're also big.
Okay. Can a shark change
That's a twofer.
slowly? Slightly.
Can a shark
Can it change? Can it change
Sure.
slowly over time?
Or
Yeah.
more
Okay.
specifically, could a shark and a stingray have evolved from a common ancestor millions
No.
of years ago?
No.
Why
Why
not?
not?
If they can
couldn't.
change, why could they not change from a common ancestor?
Could they? I mean, they
Yeah, Why
could.
couldn't they?
We don't
You
have
just
any
agreed
evidence of
things
that.
can change.
No. We don't have any evidence of that. Where's
We
your
absolutely have
evidence?
evidence.
Oh, point to
Yeah,
it.
we do.
Show
Alright,
me.
This isn't interesting.
Why do you look like your parents?
You guys have a good night.